Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci beaucoup.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your mobilization to come and listen to us this morning after a first conference that we organized on Tuesday on the future of resorts. Thank you for coming back this morning for another very important subject, which is the economic diversification of mountain areas. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Massif des Alpes, and I will be co-moderating with my colleague here, who will be also joining the DDT Hautes-Alpes as in charge of the farming department, agricultural department, and this is a great promotion for him. He accompanied us for 6 years at the Commission des Massifs, and he'll be working with the wood sector and with the agro-pastoral sector. Thank you for coming. This topic is in line with the same topic that we moderated on Tuesday on the future of resorts. If we're looking for an economic future for mountain areas, we must look to strike a better balance between the economic sectors and better complementarity. These are the issues we will be discussing this morning. The economic sectors that are all impacted by climate change, since from agro-pastoralism to tourism, including the wood sector. We will be discussing all of these questions this morning with a very representative panel of this mountain economy. Fabrice Pankouk, as the new president of the Massif Committee of the Alps, he wanted to initiate a cross-cutting group within the Massif Committee, and he was right. We'll give the floor to Didier Bic, who represents Alpine Chambers of Commerce. He will give us a testimonial on the evolution of this notion of economic diversification, in particular focusing on industry, which is still very important in the mountains. And we'll have a local focus with Jacques Adnaud, who's the president of the park, the Vercors Park, who will talk about economic and tourism issues. And then Bois des Alpes, we have two company managers who represent the wood sector. And then to open our horizons even further, we will give the floor to Isabelle Boulot, who is a company manager at Sun Conseil, and she's also vice president of the Mountain Cluster, and she's committed to a very ambitious journey, which is the Convention of Companies for the Climate. And they have a roadmap for a regenerative economy by 2030, and she'll tell us more about that. And Benoît Jeannot, who comes from Paris, to tell us about these programs for green industry and industrial regeneration. And so you'll have a complete overview of this today. Without further ado, let's start with, first of all, Fabrice Pankouk, co-president of the Massif Committee, who will tell us a bit about your intentions for the next years of your term. Thank you, Nicolas. Hello, everybody. Just a few words, because the experts here on the stage have a lot more to tell you to help give you more insight on their projects and the future. For the Massif Committee, what is our feeling about these topics? Well, first of all, when you look at the mountains, you often summarize the mountains in terms of outdoor activities and skiing, and that's wonderful, because we know how much this tourism economy weighs heavily in the balance, and it's thanks to these ski resorts that we are able to prepare the future and finance our investments that are indispensable during the transition. And yet, there are all of the other activities that already exist in our mountain areas. Some of them are heritage activities that we've neglected, and others that are more focused on innovation. And we have to always be looking for innovation in our mountain areas, because that's something that's very important in the economic world, and also it's indispensable if we want to prepare a future that will be different from today, but in line with the values that we work with. When we thought about the economy in the Massif Committee, and we have a commission called Mountain Products, this is precisely the topic. This commission called the Mountain Products, I'm not sure if the name is appropriate, because you think of Beaufort cheese, for example, when you talk about mountain products and other great products from the Oison and the Vercors. But in any case, obviously, it's not exclusive. When we talk about products, we mean everything that's produced and that has added value. And so we need to open up the spectrum further with some things that can be immediately applied in tourism. I'm thinking of thermal resorts and spas, but also everything that's been the strengths of our valleys and our areas. And we need to come back to these things with pride, because we have know-how that only exists in our mountain areas, such as industry. And I took inspiration from what was happening in the Tarentaise Valley around the Ugérie project, which is creating a lot of debate. And yet it's an industry, a heritage industry that is now sharing a real innovation project in response to what we all want to see happen, which is the first circular steel-making plant. And this is the direction that we need to go in. So there are all of the other activities, agriculture, for example. We need to talk about the wood sector and all of the different sectors involved with wood. And I think we have a roundtable that will allow us to address these topics in the broad sense. When wood moves forward, the local territory moves forward, I would like to say. Now, to conclude, in the Alpine Massif, we have a certain number of policies. We have what we call the Massif Convention. When we think about the Alps, the French Alps, we think about the northern French Alps and the southern French Alps. And of course, all together, we are supporting this interregional convention and the associated financing. That's not the topic this morning, but we're trying to look at what this financing will benefit with this desire to serve both tourism, because we want to sustainably serve tourism, not just skiing, but all of the diversified activities, outdoor activities, our agriculture, our forests, all of the activities linked with biodiversity, because they are very important, and in the end, the entire spectrum that represents our mountain areas. If there could be just a single motivation for our mandate, it is to prepare the territory of the future that will be inhabited, where people will be working, and it will be inhabitable and livable, because we will have kept an environment of high quality. Thank you, Fabrice, for these inspiring introductory remarks that set the course that we've been assigned for this new term from 2023 to 2029 at the Massif Committee, and we will be expressing these values at the state level, the regional level, and the local level, and we're happy to work with the different players of the different economic sectors. You talked about our heritage industry and industries that are being reborn, not reborn from the ashes, because that's not the case, and that would be excessive to say so. And Didier Bic, for the Chamber of the Alpine Chambers of Commerce and Industry, you participated in all of these Alpine Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and you worked intensively on the evolution of Alpine industry. You worked on the different decades, historical decades, which give us a good snapshot of Alpine industry from the past to the present. And perhaps you could tell us a bit about this work that was inspired by the economic development group of our Massif des Alpes convention. So Didier, could you tell us more about this? Are the Alps industrial, and is there still an industrial potential in the Alps? Thank you, Nicolas. We'll try to answer this question. I'll give you some figures. First of all, the Alpine Chambers of Commerce and Industry participate in the Massif Committee to try to defend the idea that industrialization isn't necessarily a bad word, even in the Alps. And our territories where we want to create jobs and maintain the population in its local area, because people in the mountains want to remain in the mountains today, we need to find the means to help them stay in the Alps. And so one of our vocations at the Chambers of Commerce is to participate in the Massif Committee and find balances, discussing this with all of the different players and stakeholders to promote the idea that industry in the mountains can be a positive element for the population. So you're right when you say that the mountains are a place for industry and have been a place for industry. People believe that industry didn't exist in the past, and yet industry in the mountains is about the same percentage with respect to the other activities. If you look at all of the different construction, commerce, services, if you look at all of the other categories of activities, economic activities, in France, industry represents 7% of the national activity, and in the Alpine French Alps Massif, it's 7%, and it's actually only 3% in France. So it's above average, and it's certainly not at zero, as you have highlighted. These are industries, indeed, that are more with low technologies, low-level technologies, but things are changing. Today, it's about 23,000 companies. Nicolas, I don't know whether you defined the scope or the area that we cover with the Alpine Massif. It's 9 French départements, and in total, or partially, so we're talking about this territory limited to these 9 French Alpine départements, which represents, as I said, 23,000 companies and 140,000 jobs in total in traditional industry. If you compare that with the service sector, which represents 50%, just like in the whole of France. Now, even if today we are below the national level, in particular in terms of technology, recent evolutions, and our studies show this, that we studied 2009 to 2022 at the Chamber of Commerce, and this study, we tried to observe the situation in 2009 and then compare it with 2022. And we see that if you look at the number of company creations and job creations, it was favorable with respect to the national French average in terms of the number of industries created. And the good news is that we are above the national average in terms of technological level. We moved away from technological levels, advanced technology levels. Now we have reached levels that are above the national average. Another observation is that we have more companies, slightly more. The jobs are fairly stable. We're looking at 0.5%, so that's not a huge change. But in terms of numbers of companies, we've increased by 43% between 2009 and 2022. That's enormous. That also means that we have a lot less large companies and a lot more very small companies. That can be good news or bad news, because small companies are companies in the field, very local, and they usually don't relocate their jobs. They're not part of large groups that can close, for example, for relocation, but there are different types of jobs, and these are a lot of very small companies who have set up business. And we see this as a good anchoring in the mountain areas, and it's good for stability and good for the stability of the population and the opportunities that this represents for local populations to remain in the mountains and in their local areas. That's what we can say about recent years. We talked about the possibilities and for evolution in industry in the Alps. Of course, there are certain sectors in all of the industrial sectors. Certain sectors have really succeeded better than others. In particular, everything linked to energy.
So I'll talk about hydropower. Now, in mountains, unfortunately, there are a number of drawbacks when it comes to traffic in the winter. You know, there are geographic characteristics that have to be taken into account, but there are also advantages. Water is a source of wealth and potential that we're probably not capitalizing on enough today. So electro-intensive industries understood this several years ago. Many have disappeared, but many are thinking, and Fabrice mentioned this, many are thinking about the future, about strengthening their presence and using that energy more. Because in terms of yield, in terms of other aspects, it's a very clean energy, and it gives a much better yield when compared with solar panels and wind energy. So, if we think about the areas, they have characteristics that allow us to benefit from this energy, so let's make the most of it. And that's where we're seeing the trends over the last 10 years. That's what companies have focused on. And then there are other ideas to be explored. Textile and clothing, for example. There's been a big focus on research for equipment, heat, insulation for textiles. So, and everything that stems from this. Everything that stems from skiing, for example, or, you know, mountain outdoor activities. So that's led to the creation of lots of textile companies. And there are two big sectors that are capitalizing on the advantages of mountain areas, and there are activities generated by mountain areas. So these two changes, according to sector, like skiing and mountain activities, or thanks to geography, these are the two main trends where companies are working today. So for us, we're seeing these industries emerging, but we're also thinking about other things. So it's good to make the most of what's happening in the field. So when we wanted to set things up in the past, we thought about the energy. And especially from the point of view of electro-intensive industries. Today, there are many things that can be done in the field because we have the population that is there as well. So that's just a quick overview of mountain industries. Things are changing, but tourism is at the top of the list. But there are other things, and that's what we're working on, so that things evolve in the right direction. Thank you. That's very clear, and it creates a lot of enthusiasm to see that there are these different sectors of activity, that there's a renewal of industry locally. And we'll hear more about this from Benoît Mangenot from the ANCT. Now let me hand over to Philippe. So we're going to present you two approaches about economic diversification, so an area-based one and a sector-based one. So if we take the area-based one, the Alpine Massif is very heterogeneous. There are some areas that are isolated and some that are close to cities. So we've decided to ask the Vercors Park to talk to us about how it thinks about economic diversification and maybe explain the role of an area as an institution when it comes to supporting chains. So Jacques Adnaud will be explaining all of this. Yes, hello, everybody. So first of all, I'm going to talk to you about the big economic changes and the challenges in the Vercors, but perhaps I need to just specify a number of things. What does the Vercors represent? It's a massif that is karstic. There's a lot of chalk. There's a lot of limestone, lots of caves, water going through them, and that's the stage set. So it goes from Grenoble to the Diois area. So we've got a mosaic of different areas, different climates, a mosaic of different products, and a mosaic of different types of work. And they're all marked by agriculture, life. The area is a living thing. It's lived in. And if there was no agriculture, there would be nothing. There would be no tourism, and there would be no park. So that's a starting point for us. Don't think that everything comes along like this. If there's no agriculture, there's no park, there's no tourism. It's an area that's gained a label in the 70s. It's a regional natural park, the Vercors Regional National Park, and it's not managed like an area or a municipality or a group of municipalities. It's managed according to assignments. So there's no tax. Our resources depend directly on the region, on the counties and on the municipalities. Our job is to provide them with support and, as far as possible, to make sure that each and every one has their place and that there's nobody outside the circle, not sitting at the table. I'm insisting on this because we have an area, a mid-mountain area, that has to take on board all stakeholders and all populations, whoever they may be. If we don't include them, they are outside the playing field, and the mountain will no longer be a living being. Now, historically, the mid-mountain economy has been through different changes. So there was the visit of the president that was a marking event. So there are several factors that have led to change. First of all, there's the historic pillar, which is the forest economy. 72% of the area is forest area, and that does paint the scene for us. This pillar has vacillated. Agriculture was not enough to feed the population. There were roads, there was mobility, there were access means in the past, and there was traffic in the Vercors. But this economy progressively improved in the 70s, and it was saved by focusing on health and tourism, hotels, holiday places, and there was a specific event that dates back to 1960, and that is the Winter Olympics in Grenoble. This event led to more skiing and installation of an economy focused on sports. Today, the Vercors reflects a vision of contemporary times. It's a complex vision. How can you get an economic activity to work that depends on numerous factors at different levels? So agriculture on the one hand, but it's a small-scale agriculture with small-scale farms. We don't have big spaces. There are big spaces, but not big farms. And alongside that, you've got ski resorts. How do you bring all of that together? The second thing is that you've got population-based services at intermunicipal level. So you don't have what you find in a city. In mountains, you've got minimum services, and that's just part of life. As we've heard, today there was no snow. Sorry, yesterday there was no snow. Today there is. Now, how do you get an economic activity to work that is in line with contemporary challenges? Because we can no longer hide ourselves behind a wall or a mirror. Everybody knows that today the state of our environment has been the same for 40 years. It's been downgraded, it's deteriorated, it no longer corresponds to the needs of man, and we will not survive if we don't take that situation into account. So it's it's an input to be taken into account. Everybody knows how important it is to mitigate the situation and to work on adapting the economic system of the vehicle. Now, how do we get the economic activity going? Well, we need a model that we are familiar with. Everything has to be built. It has to be based on a shared vision. Fabrice Pankouk was saying we have to go back to our roots, who we are as an area. And this is what we are going to be striving towards in the vehicle. We have to think at the whole area level, the geological perimeter level, because it's a multiple-faceted entity with multiple activities. We have to be inclusive. In other words, we have to take into account all kinds of populations and all kinds of developments. It's not about looking at costs, it's about looking at the future and preparing for that future and strengthening that future. From a general point of view, moving towards inclusive models is about including all of the populations involved. And that means making sure that the right strategies and projects are set up so that production can change and consumption can change via different ideas. Let me give you three. The first is to produce and consume locally. Stop running around the world to sell our cheeses. I'm saying this for a very simple reason, but at least things are clear. We've got to reconcile economic activity. We have to get everybody involved. There has to be social fairness, and that's vital in mountain areas. It's vital everywhere else, of course. And then there's collective usefulness. We have to rationalize consumption. We have to make sure that we're not wasting resources, and we have to work for as many as possible. And our paradigm, therefore, is shifting in our minds, and that's what we must focus on. We have to have the right approaches based on the circular economy, an economy based on solidarity. And let's talk about the circular economy. We need to make sure that our ecosystems are working. This means that the eco-design of services and products has to be defended. It means from manufacturing to recycling, everything has to be integrated. So we're very close to industrial models, so they're doing their jobs properly. We have to design everything, including the reuse and the repair of products. And behind all of this, it means that we have to optimize the use of materials and energy. And I'm saying this because of the caustic massif. The water goes through it. Where does it go, though? Not much is left. Therefore, we've got to make sure that that water is used in the right way, that it's transformed correctly, that it's used in the right conditions, conditions that protect rather than disperse. The third idea is the solidarity and economic, the solidarity economy. It's about investing all local economies from agriculture, from cooperative agriculture, AMAPs, through to renewable energies with village power stations that are a good idea. They work very well. They produce local electricity that's managed locally, and that creates life in villages because there are people who are interested in it. Yes, let me just step on the gas. So there are different priorities. We have to support innovative initiatives. For example, we have to support local savings and local investments. We have to have solidarity-based projects. So the social and solidarity economy is important. It means moving from a linear economy to a circular economy that is circular. It means reducing waste, and I don't need to explain what that means. We've got to manage the way we use resources, and we've got to be able to support initiatives from economic actors. We've got to develop labels. We've got to have execution clauses in purchasing contracts that are used by local authorities, and we've got to make sure that the life cycle is forever preserved. And what about our role in all of that? Well, it's about getting people around the table It's about making sure that those who are not speaking to each other need to speak to each other. It's about supporting projects. It's about initiating experimental projects. And it's about supporting local authorities, economic actors for the implementation of projects. Now, the park offers nothing if it doesn't bring people together. So people are happy to share and talk together. They've never been against that. Now, concerning tourism, we've got an exceptional landscape with lots of wealth. We need to bring together the tourist offer and the reality of the situation and the identity of the area. Let's not invent something that's extraordinary. Let's take life where it is. Let's show those who come that this area is part of those who are providing hospitality. It's not about conventional tourism. It's about discovery. It's about setting up contacts. It's about protecting fragile resources. It's about educating people about the environment. It's a new model that has to be resilient, that is less costly, and that respects cultural differences. Working together, that's the key phrase for tomorrow. There's no other hypothesis. It's not collectivism. It's about using the collective as a means of coming together. And those are two different things. It's about resorts writing a new chapter in their history. It's about understanding that we're talking about specific places where there can be drivers for areas to exist. We don't have enough snow, but let's continue to operate with the snow that exists. Let's open up new doors so that in the future the area has a role to play, that people want to be in the area. So even when there's no snow, we need to see that there is still life, that there are people moving around. So let's celebrate life. And to conclude, when we think about the future, it lives inside us. So it's up to us to make that future come true. And we need to move from quantity to quality, from quality to quantity, from individuals to collective approaches. In this case, we will all be a little bit more successful and a little bit more linked together. So we can give him a great round of applause. Well done. So lots of key words used there. Thank you for sharing that vision. It's very clear the role of that an area can have supporting different approaches. So now let's talk about sectors. How can economic actors do things? How have they worked with their areas? You know, this is something that we can talk about too. So Grégory Martin, who's in charge of one of the biggest sawmills in the area, to explain to us how that sawmill has evolved in line with economic diversification. How is it adapting today to climate change? So perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself, and I'm sure you have additional things to say, and then we'll hear from we'll hear about the second transformation. So it's one of the biggest sawmills in the Savoie. It's in Rognier, next to Albertville. So we've been in business since the 1970s. So adaptation is something that we've been doing all the time. We've adapted between 2000 and 2020 to the market. We had to get bigger. We had to improve the quality of our products. We had to invest considerable sums so that we were in line with international competition. So there was a huge development phase between 2000 and 2020. And today, there's a new challenge that we're facing. Decarbonization is impacting the whole economy, especially the construction industry. And today, the rules of construction are changing, especially with Euro 2020. And increasingly, wood will be used. So over the next decades, producers need to be able to meet that demand. So this represents a big opening for wood in the construction industry. In the next 5 to 10 years, we need to step up our production in order to meet demand. So climate change. So we hear a lot about climate change and threats. So the question of adapting our forests to climate change, is that, according to you, going to have a negative impact on the sector because there will be more illnesses? And what about forests in the mountains? What about development opportunities? So we were saved from illnesses for many, many years. As of the Jura, there have been problems, droughts, for example. We're beginning to see that problem. So yes, we're being impacted by climate change. And of course, there are a lot of concerns. There are forests that are perishing. So we need to, the whole sector needs to know how to use the wood. So there's a phenomenal challenge. So there's a lot of work being done about that. So you've got that danger, but we are a high altitude area. So I do believe that we have a future ahead of us. There will be a source in the future, a source of wood, but at the same time, we've got to have enough wood to be able to develop and meet future demand. Yes, so we've got a market that's being developed, we've got a resource. Do you consider that the sector, that the Alpine wood sector is organized enough, is ready to meet the demand? Well, I think that we've got all of the right assets. We've got the material, we've got a source of material, we've got companies. There are enough companies focusing on wood in the Alpine region. We've got forest people, carpenters, woodworkers. We've got all of the assets. The market is there, is here and now. Things are changing quickly. So we mustn't miss the train. We've got everything we need. We mustn't lose view of something else as well. To sell wood-based product, to put Alpine wood in Alpine homes, we need to get the wood out of the forests. So we will not be able to meet the demand and develop our wood economy without bringing wood out of the forest. So if we have to saw-mow, we need to bring out wood from the forest. This is one of the big challenges. The sector is a dynamic sector. Big investments are being made. We're trying to adapt our offer. We're trying to step up our ranges. But for 1 cubic meter of sawn wood, we need a lot of wood from the forest. So that's where the challenge is, the ability that we have to use the resources, to get the resources out of the forest. So let's turn now to our mountain areas and the ability to work on the acceptability of wood cutting. So that's what you were saying, isn't it? The difficulty that forest entrepreneurs have when it comes to be able to go and cut wood in the forests. Yes, can everybody hear me? Yes, that's exactly it. So between 2000 and 2020, things were very difficult for the sector. Now we're moving into a period where there will be new prospects. But there is a certain amount of reticence, and that's what we're seeing. People don't necessarily want us to use wood, so there's a paradox. We have to use wood, we have to produce locally, but people don't want us to cut the wood, so that's not going to work. I think we need to spread the word. We use wood in a sustainable way. We've got a forest operation that is very respectful. It's about gardening. It's about doing things properly, and we've been doing that for a long, long time. We mustn't be pointed at as doing things in the wrong way. No, people need to be able to do their job. Sébastien Baucher, you're in charge of a company specialized in outside furniture, notably in resorts. How are you seeing this transitional period? Are you seeing this development? And how can you explain your Alpine wood certification approach? Why did you commit to it? Why is it a solution for you? Yes, hello, everybody. So we have realized that the market, there's an increasingly big wood market, even if sometimes we're a bit disappointed about some things. You know, we never have enough wood. I think wood meets all of the current criteria when we think about the ecological crisis, the question of climate change. So there's a lot of awareness among the population and among public authorities at this level. Our company, we made larch-based wood, and we made furniture for outside purposes. We wanted a natural wood for that. And there's a lot of dynamic in that area. So that's why we wanted to move towards Alpine wood certification, because this sort of reflected our values. And it's a label that gives us recognition and visibility. People say, where does your wood come from? Now we can say that our wood comes from the forests next door, and that it's certified Alpine wood. That means that it's local. It means that it's subject to sustainable development, sustainable forest development. So where we realize that, you know, the public has this awareness now. They imagine that we might kill the forest if we cut down wood, but now they realize that it's about renewing the forest, it's about renewing the carbon well, and it's about helping with the future. So it's also about, certification is also about preparing ahead for future standards. There's a standard that's going to impose a guarantee on people providing wood-based products. That there has to be a guarantee that the wood is not of foreign origin. And it's about capitalizing on the local sector. I think that's important. There are big sawmills, like the Savoie sawmill, that are competing with, you know, wood coming from Northern Europe. So there's a whole network of local sawmills. We talked about the black beetle. We talked about illnesses. If we have to do something quickly, you know, a small sawmill in the village or in a municipality is going to be able to do that quickly. There are social roles as well. To meet demand, of course, we have to be local. And let me come back to the environmental aspect and the circular economy and short distribution channels. So Alpine wood, you know, also has a big collective, and that's important for setting up a sector that's defending local products. And let me finish with one last small thing. Today, we're seeing that public powers are providing support for the development of this sector, for the development of their organization. There needs to be buy-in. That buy-in has to come from customers, from opinion leaders. So in some regions, in some areas, you know, it's normal to use wood for construction purposes. It's traditional. It's part of the habits. But in other areas, it's, you know, there's still a lot of concrete being used, and then there's a bit of wood on the facade to make it pretty. But if we really want to decarbonize, we need to use wood in structures. Thank you very much for that presentation of the Alpine wood sector, which is really in line with the different policies. So we've already opened up prospects, haven't we, thanks to your presentations, gentlemen. We've looked at the area-based approach and the Valley One program, and I'd like to say hello to all of the business leaders who've joined us. They're all promoting that. We've had a focus on the Alpine wood. Now we're going to finish this roundtable with a sequence where we're going to be opening up horizons, and I'm going to hand over to Isabelle Boulot, who is the head of Sun Conseil. It's an engineering company, and we'll hear about new fields, new prospects being opened. So you are part of the Convention for of companies for the climate, and you are in charge of the transformation of your own company, and you are also committed to the mountain cluster, an emblematic cluster focused on tourist development. You're vice president. How are you experiencing the transition? What do you feel about it, and how do you intend to contribute to the economic success?
Thank you for your invitation. Good morning. This is a lot of responsibility. Well, the fact that we participated in this company convention for the climate around Lyon and the Alps, we federated a lot of different sizes of companies, from single-person companies up to large groups. This approach, we wanted to launch this approach to put ourselves in a situation of transition and evolution, to see how, with a very appropriate methodology, initiate change in our business model, first of all, to see where we could find synergies. And what we realized clearly, and this is what we're trying to express today with the stakeholders and our customers locally, is this very strong territorial aspect that we have identified. We see that synergies come from what surrounds us in proximity, whether it's collaboration between different companies or synergies with the local territories. We ask them to express their needs, and so that we can help find solutions together with them. So today, there is this challenge of transition, but it's also a challenge of reflection. We need to think about things. We need to take a step back and decide what is our strategy for the future. That is the key word. Even if time is running out and we really need to react, there is an urgency to reflect about what we really want to do in the near future, to do it correctly, with the right synergies, the right actions, and sustainability and durability of our actions, and a durability of our vision, and the support for our projects. There's this dichotomy between a very limited time and a longer period of time. This is disturbing for some people, because today it's hard to reconcile the two. We know that there's a real emergency, that we need to act. People don't necessarily have the resources or even the intellectual resources for change. We don't have all the information, the data. Things are moving fast, and we have to reflect on this. Thank you. You said the challenge is to think, to do things differently. There's the economy that's changing towards a regenerative economy of the living. And 2030 is tomorrow. Now we're counting just in days the time that separates us from 2030 for these ecological transition objectives. Could you tell us more about this regenerative economy and resilience of the territory? Well, regenerative economy is taking into account the living, the impact that we have on the living. We're talking about ecology and the environment, but at the CEC we talk about the living, everything. We, as human beings, represent the living, and our entire ecosystem, whatever it is. And this reflection and the way we try to act, let me take an example of what we did on our roadmap today. We're working a lot in mountain areas and ski resorts. We have a proposal for certain products with materials that are mainly based on oil and petroleum. And our first pillar in our roadmap, we decided to say today that there are alternatives. There's a recycling stream that's very present. We have innovation. There are young generations who've filed patents, who've done wonderful things. So we're working on that. We're working on materials, these materials that we have around us locally, And we need to ask ourselves the question, how can we avoid using everything that's negative for the planet and do things better? We don't necessarily need to do some of these things, and that's what we call renouncement or giving up certain things. We've set these objectives to totally replace certain product ranges, take the risk to do this, because that's a real challenge. We are a small structure, but we need to stay the course and really commit. And commitment means that we say, we need to push our customers towards this perpetual consumption. On the contrary, couldn't we think about specific needs and do things correctly with what we have in front of us locally available? And beyond Sun Conseil, you're the vice president of the mountain cluster, which is a wider framework of intervention. How do you intend to influence, communicate, and share this regenerative economy experience with the entire cluster? Well, very modestly, it's true that there were many of us last year, many of our members of the mountain cluster. It's a network of companies in the mountain development sector. So we sat around the table to think about this, to reflect on how we can act for the future. And the participation in this CEC, there's one person from the Poma company who really committed and decided to bet on this future and organized a first session 2 years ago. And he really conveyed this idea that we could work on. And it was successful because, again, there's a whole series of companies, including our friends from the Monin company, who've now committed to a new session. The idea is to open up people's minds to think about the transition, to think differently about the potential for a new business model. How can we contribute at the territorial level to say, you're working in a certain way, how could we change things? How could we build new things together? How could this reflection lead to a new form of collective innovation? And it's this work that I think we are sharing with the cluster, and we are disseminating it. We're offering the local areas to propose their problems to us, and we reflect on them together. And then certain companies can come in with their know-how, their culture, and their innovations to try to respond to these challenges of the future that are very strong. I think we have a real pool of companies in our region, a huge potential with these companies, and we need to really benefit from these companies, and they can benefit you. You were talking about the territory. Thank you, Isabelle. We are lucky to have the Alpine industry territories with us, and Benoît Mongenot, who works for the ANCT, the National Agency for Territorial Cohesion. It's a great tool for green industrialization. Benoît, the floor is yours to present this program, which is quite original, which has just been launched last autumn. Thank you, Nicolas. Hello, everybody. Territoire d'Industrie is a national program that was launched in 2018 and was relaunched up until 2027 now. And it's based on the observation that we've all made, which is that most of the levers in terms of reindustrialization in France are at the territorial level. When we talk about land, which is a huge issue, we're looking at requalifying brownfields. We're looking at the challenge of developing new training to respond to the needs of industry and really promote industrial jobs with the local public in local areas. When we talk about the circular economy, of course, with these decarbonization challenges and with questions of water and sharing resources, all of this takes place at the local level. And this observation was made at the base of our Territoire d'Industrie program. In a local industrial level, we need to sit around the table with local authorities to really build a 360-degree roadmap altogether that will meet the local needs and be aligned with the characteristics of the territory. So we have 183 industry territories with a label now in France that represent jobs. There are 13 in the Alpine Massif. So within each of these territoires d'industrie, local authorities and industries are developing a common roadmap for industrial development. We have over 2,000 actions that have now been proposed in each of these territories. We look at structuring sectors, for example, the wood sector, biosourced materials such as linen, wool, and flax, and hemp. There are also subjects of ecological transition. There's different types of training for the leather industry, the wood industry, etc. And our role at the level of the state, we are partners of the programs, and with the regions as well. There's BPI France, the ADEME. We provide support and we give tools and resources to help the local areas to make this industrial ambition become concrete. In each territoire d'industrie, we have a project manager who are currently being recruited. There are a certain number of them here in the room. These project managers come to make concrete the action plans with the elected officials and the industrialists. It's only by doing things together that we can really meet these challenges of reindustrialization. So we have project managers, and we need engineering skills as well, because when we talk about restructuring certain sectors, these are very complex projects. So we're carrying out a study today on creating a wood cluster in one of the territoires d'industrie. Last year we worked on structuring an innovation cluster for watchmaking with this challenge of innovation and maintaining talent on this side of the border in France. And recently, this year, there's been a budget to finance projects with a green fund, 70 million euros for ecological transition. The idea is to participate and co-finance industrial projects that participate in relocating certain sectors that are very anchored locally in line with the ecological transition we're talking about. People hear a lot about hydrogen and aviation, for example, but here, for the ecological transition, we're focusing on wood, for example, and biosourced materials, local, sustainable materials. And in this measure, there's a priority that's given to support for projects that participate in the economic diversification of mountain massif. So, Territoire d'Industrie is a national program for reindustrialization, but the idea is to really trust the local territories. We provide them with support to carry out their action plans. So the idea is to remain very open. We talked about the question of collaboration, to work with industry. So we invite all of the stakeholders interested to join this approach. There are 12 territoires d'industrie ranging from Evian down to Nice, Vallée de l'Arve, Maurienne. So don't hesitate to contact us and participate in this approach if you're an economic development actor or an industrialist who want to work with this reindustrialization program. Thank you, Benoit. So you see, we have reflections underway, we have actions underway, we have company managers who are motivated, and the local areas who are very proactive. The good news is that there are resources, and Benoit just mentioned some of the financial resources. So thank you all. This roundtable is finished. I hope you have a better vision of the economic diversification of our mountain areas. We invite you to continue the exchanges on the different stands. For the wood sector, it will be at Fibois. Sun Conseil is present. The Chambers of Commerce of Savoie, for example, is present. And we are present until this evening. This is the first time that we came to Mountain Planet, the ANCT, and for the Territoire d'Industrie, there's another conference in the Villard de Lans room to continue working with all of the companies who would like to focus on these synergies in the territories. Thank you, Cédric, for the co-moderation. Thank you for the interpreters and the technicians. Thank you very much.